Coming up, the Hawks are out and the Grizzlies and Suns are one win away from moving on. This is Locked On Now, NBA.
The biggest games, the best performances, expert analysis. You are Locked On Now.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Now NBA, local experts weighing in on the biggest stories in basketball. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every single weekday. We've got our Locked On NBA hosts here to recap the playoff action from last night. The Heat moved on by knocking out the Hawks in the biggest game.
The biggest game.
The Hawks season came to a close last night in Miami. The Heat took down the Hawks in just 5 games, and Locked On Hawks looks ahead after going from the Eastern Conference Finals to a first-round exit.
Hello friends, my name is Brad Rowland, and the Atlanta Hawks season is now over with a 5-game loss to the Miami Heat in the first round. The Hawks go down on this Tuesday evening in Miami by a narrow margin, only 3 points, 97-94. Kind of a slugfest, as you might imagine by that score, and the Hawks had to come back from being down double figures for a large portion of the second half of this game. The uphill battle began with a collapse late in the first half that really kind of put the Hawks behind the 8 ball. They were competitive. They were certainly valiant in terms of their comeback effort down the stretch, but just not enough offense. DeAndre Hunter, though, was the lone bright spot for the offense. 35 points, a playoff career high for Hunter, who was magnificent with his jump shot along the way, and then sort of overcoming some of the obstacles elsewhere for this offense. But at the end of the game, not quite enough firepower, and the Hawks had a chance with about 5 seconds to go. Didn't even get a shot off down the stretch, and sort of a fitting end to a frustrating season top to bottom from the Hawks. They have a lot of introspection to be doing in the coming months, but if nothing else right now, the Hawks season is now over, and they'll have a couple months now before the draft to sort of reset and plan for the future. We'll get into all of that. We'll get into Trae Young's struggles, everything else about the Atlanta Hawks this season, and especially in Game 5, coming up on the Locked On Hawks podcast.
The Minnesota Timberwolves let another good chance at a win slip through their fingers in Game 5 against the Grizzlies. The Memphis fourth quarter comeback has Minnesota's back against the wall, and Locked On Wolves goes over the finish.
Ben Beacon with Locked On Wolves here. The Timberwolves fell in Game 5 to the Memphis Grizzlies by just 2 points. Anthony Edwards hit a game-tying three-pointer from the right corner with just 3 seconds to play, but after a timeout, the Grizzlies won on a Ja Morant layup after Ant gambled for a steal on the inbounds play. It was a game the Wolves led for most of it until Memphis staged a furious fourth quarter comeback. The Wolves were up by 2-3 possessions midway through the quarter. And offensively, were mostly getting what they wanted. They missed some open shots, but then defensively, Ja Morant took over after the Wolves did a great job on him defensively for the first 3 quarters or so. But late in the game, the Grizzlies continued to get D'Angelo Russell switched on to Ja Morant. Also, even if the Wolves defended the point of attack well, the ball, when it would swing back to Ja, he was able to go to work and do damage down the stretch. He finished with 30 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists for the Wolves. Cat had 28 and 12, made 5 threes on 7 attempts from outside the arc. And Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell both had decent games as well, though some of the issues late in the game were related to D'Lo's defense and also some maybe a little bit too much shooting from D'Angelo Russell and not quite enough from Cat and Ant down the stretch. We're going to break all that down, what exactly happened in this game on the podcast, the post-game podcast. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
The Pelicans couldn't win a second game in Phoenix in Game 5, and they now trail 3-2 in the series against the Suns. But Locked On Pelicans has reasons to be optimistic going into this win-or-go-home Game 6.
The Pelicans head back to New Orleans facing elimination after losing to the Phoenix Suns 112-97, but there's a lot of reason for optimism. I'm Jake Madison, host of Locked On Pelicans and Locked On NBA. Watching that game, did you think New Orleans played well at all? I didn't, and it was an 8-point game late in the fourth quarter. The win was there for the taking, and for whatever reason, the Pelicans didn't grab it. CJ McCollum shot 7 for 22. The team turned the ball over 15 times. No one played any defense. Mikal Bridges had a career night, and there were bad rotations by head coach Willie Green. I could list even more reasons why the Pelicans lost, and they would have won if they were able to correct just one of those things. So going into Game 6 Thursday, an elimination game with what will be a very raucous crowd in the Smoothie King Center, I'd feel just fine if I were the Pelicans. So for more on what they need to do to force a Game 7 and potentially win this series, be sure to check out the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
That's all for today on Locked On Now NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. Make sure you check out Locked On NBA and your team's Locked On podcast during these playoff runs. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Now.